What if you took the thrills of action-ploitation films, the lewdness of sexploitation films, and then set it in the Edo period of Japan? You'd get today's 1972 detective action chambara starring Zaitoichi himself, Shintaro Katsu as the titular main character, Hanzo Itami. Set in the Edo period, Hanzo is an incorruptible force of good, in a time where unscrupulous lawmen were commonplace. It's a story about law, order, and the struggle to maintain both in a corrupt world. Today, we're reviewing the cult chambara Hanzo the Razor, Sword of Justice. My name is GojiraFerret, and I'll be your host. Let's begin. In 1967, Shintaro Katsu had already become known for his role as Zaitoichi, the Blind Swordsman. Dai Films, the distributor and production company of the Zaitoichi films that brought Shintaro so much fame, would see a decline in popularity. This would push Shintaro into creating his own production company, Katsu Productions. The company would generate classic films in the 70s, such as Zaitoichi Meets Yojimbo, Mute Samurai, and the ever-so-popular Lone Wolf and Cub, starring his older brother, Tomisaburo Wakayama, as Ito Ogami. Shintaro would find himself portraying a new fictional character, a lawman driven by a strong sense of justice, and a play off of the Western exploitation film genre that would become ever so popular during that time. The film would be filled with graphic depictions of action and gratuitous sex scenes, wrapped up in a plot involving corrupt politicians and sleazy police, with Hanzo to be the one to expose it all. Zaitoichi and The Last Samurai director Kenji Mizumi would be hired on to make the film, with the writing room filled with Kazuo Koyuki and Takashi Kanada, the former being a writer for Lady Snowblood, with the latter only being responsible for this film and its sequels. Chikashi Makiura would be brought in as cinematographer, paired with art director Seiichi Oda. Music would be headed by Kunihiko Murai, who would take musical inspiration from the funky riffs of films like Shaft. Released in color by Toho during the winter of 1972 under its original title Goyokiba, the film's reception would mimic that of the exploitation films that it was trying to recreate, which means a very room temperature response from moviegoers and even fans of chambara. Later on, it would spawn 2 sequels, making this a trilogy. Now, without further ado, let's jump right into the gritty world of Hanzo the Razor, Sword of Justice. In the Japanese capital of Edo, Hanzo the Razor Itami is a hard-boiled and no-nonsense officer of the law. His strong sense of justice is displayed while he belittles his superiors for their blatant corruption by accepting bribes. Disillusioned by his commanding officer Magobe the Snake Onishi, played by Ko Nishimura, we see Hanzo training and torturing himself by unorthodox means. After a verbal argument with Onishi, the Razor is suspicious of his commander and sends his servants to spy on the snake. Onishi's loyal servants begin rounding up innocent people, claiming them to be vagrants. During the unjust operation, Hanzo comes across a fleeing man who tells him he has information about an escaped murderer named Killer Kanbei. Sensing something foul afoot, Hanzo fakes killing the man and carries him to his home. While the man heals from a broken nose, he tells Hanzo that a dangerous samurai of the Bizen clan, known as Killer Kanbei, who had been arrested and exiled to an island, had been seen with an unknown woman. Hanzo follows his gut and is able to identify the woman that Kanbei had been seen with as Onishi's mistress, Omino. The young woman is framed for a fake murder, which gives Hanzo the ability to arrest her for interrogation. Omino is taken to a boat where Hanzo begins his very unorthodox form of interrogation. And this is where the sexploitation of the film comes to light. So, if this subject is uncomfortable for you, then there's no shame in skipping this segment. Hanzo, by way of using sex, is able to pleasure Omino to the point she begins confessing everything she knows. As she spills her confession, we learn that Onishi was bribed with money and her very own body to release Kanbei and imprison a look-alike by 2 unknown people. Onishi is threatened to be transferred to Kofu by the female of the duo. Realizing that only someone with authority could transfer a magistrate, Hanzo begins to suspect more powerful individuals are involved. The next day, while training, Hanzo calls upon a servant of the inner castle, Yamawaki. He questions the servant and learns that the woman named Lady Oraku has the ability to transfer someone like Onishi. Unlikely that Oraku would be involved, Hanzo digs more and discovers that she favors a woman named Oryura and her father Genpaku. Their favor with Lady Oraku is enough to possibly sway her into such actions as transferring the chief. Hanzo devises that Oria and Genpaku are the ones who bribed Onishi, but the motivation is unclear. A rumor surfaces that Iga spies were killed by an unknown bodyguard when they attempted to kidnap Oria. As Hanzo questions why Oria would have such a bodyguard protecting her, the interrogation ends as assassins, dressed as firefighters, ambush the Razor. A fight breaks loose in Hanzo's home, and he uses his arsenal of weapons and a booby-trapped house to dispatch the assassins. Eventually, Hanzo is able to fight them off long enough to cause them to retreat. With more questions than answers, Hanzo takes Umino and stages a faux arrest in front of Onishi. Tricked by the facade, Onishi devises a plan to help Umino escape and be reunited with Kanbei during the transfer. Little does the snake know, Hanzo is hiding in a secret room, eavesdropping on their conversation. As the night falls, Umino is escorted to jail by Hanzo and Onishi. Umino's escape attempt is successful as she jumps off a bridge into a river. The privy Hanzo is able to have his men rescue and apprehend Umino as Killer Kanbei steps from the shadows and reveals himself. Both Hanzo the Razor and Killer Kanbei face off on the bridge. Kanbei's men are unable to outmatch the officer's skill, and the killer steps forward and duels Hanzo. The samurai's swordsmanship is superior to the Razor's, and Hanzo struggles to hold his own against Kanbei. Eventually, Kanbei missteps and is bested by the Edo officer. In Kanbei's final moments, Hanzo confirms that he was indeed the bodyguard that protected Oriya from the Iga spies. Now, with these pieces falling together, Hanzo enters Genpaku's estate and is able to arrest Oriya for harboring Kanbei. Once again, using his unorthodox style of interrogation, Hanzo discovers that Oriya is tattooed with powdered ink that is only seen in hot water. The tattoos being handwritten love notes from Lady Oraku to her secret lover, an actor named Ichinojo. The Edo officer is able to figure out that Oriya was guarded by Kanbei because she was aware of Oraku's secret love affair, thus making her safety vital. Oriya and her father bribed Onishi, believing that Kanbei was the only one able to protect her. Pleased that he had solved the case of Oraku's secret love affair, Hanzo is seen afterwards enjoying some ramen. An odd plot plays out involving an ill father who yearns for death, and his wishes are carried out by Hanzo. The movie ends with Hanzo thinking back to the events of the investigation, his eyes staring coldly into the distance, awaiting the next case. Visuals are quite basic, save for a few interesting shots that were employed. But with this film being very inspired by the B-rated films of the 1970s, they didn't really experiment or think outside the box. I will admit the cinematography is rougher and grittier, adding to the hard-boiled cop motif. The colors are dark and earthy, which provides a great backdrop for the bright spurts of vibrant red blood during action scenes. Acting is full of cheese, even with Shintaro Katsu and Ko Nishimura as the main protagonist and secondary antagonists respectively. The movie revolves around primarily Hanzo, and there are rarely any scenes without him on screen. That being said, we're given a full dose of Shintaro's acting, and with how one-dimensional Hanzo is, it's just on par with what this movie is. My one complaint is the poor utilization of Ko Nishimura, as he was an experienced Chambara actor at the time of filming. His character, who I thought should have been more opposing, comes off more bumbling and less threatening. Regardless, the acting, especially Katsu's part, is exactly what this film needed. The main purpose of an action-ploitation film, especially in the detective subcategory, is the action. Sadly, we weren't given as much action as a movie like this should provide, and for a reason I'll explain soon. We only get two big fight scenes, the one in Hanzo's house and the standoff on the bridge against Kanbei. For what it's worth, the first action scene is the best. It's full of over-the-top gore, lots of blood fountains, and fun ways to dispatch an enemy with a booby-trapped house. The duel on the bridge, though, was poor. It was standard, slow, and lacking in the splashes of red like the previous blood affair. Aside from any other tiny skirmishes, there are the only two action scenes, and it just sucks that they should have given Kanbei a bigger send-off. The writing is exactly where this film falls short, and very short for that matter. Now, exploitation films aren't known for their amazing storytelling, and at its core, the plot serves only to get us to the next action or sex scene. At the beginning of Sword of Justice, the plot knows its place, and the action and sex scenes take the forefront, until the second half, and for some reason, the film forgets what it is. Now, the plot is the main focus, and with it being a weak B-rated movie plot, it shows all of its flaws on full display. Yes, I'm not shocked that the plot isn't somewhat predictable, but the execution of how Hanzo unravels the case is loose at best. I had to watch the film twice and closely analyze the information of the case to understand the connection between Kanbei and Oriya. And if you're not paying attention, their connection is expressed during a quick throwaway line that is actually interrupted by the assassination attempt. Now, if this movie was deeper and more plot-driven, with writers who were attempting to make a well-thought-out detective thriller, that would be one thing. But the plot isn't well thought out. It's tailored for an exploitation film and shouldn't try to be deeper than it really is. Once I caught on to the missing piece itself, I doubted the connection because of how loose it comes off. The writing and the plot sadly shouldn't have strayed away from what it was, and it shouldn't have taken itself too seriously. As an upside, the music didn't lose sight of what it was. It's funky, it's intense, and it gives that extra touch to what this film's existence is. It's heavy with the grind of a bass guitar, loud and boisterous. The score stands out and falls in line with the film's 1970s B-rated detective flick aesthetic. As far as Chambara goes, it's possibly not the best in the lineup. Its loud, gory, and hypercharged sexualization strays far from traditional Chambara. It's an experiment to see if someone confused Chambara with the exploitation films that were all the rage in the 1970s. It carries a Dirty Harry vibe accompanied with the seriousness of Dolomite. Is it a bad film? No. But on paper, it's not a good one either. It's just a film that existed in a very strange era of filmmaking, and it's a product of that. Despite its flaws, it does have a cult following of people who see it for what it is and what it was attempting to accomplish. I see it, and I applaud it, even if poorly executed. Hanzo the Razor Sword of Justice is just a different movie made for a different audience during a different time, and you gotta love it for that. That was Hanzo the Razor Sword of Justice, the first film in the Hanzo the Razor trilogy. We have 2 more films to review, so get ready for Hanzo the Razor, The Snare. I hope you enjoyed today's review, and if you did, give it a like and subscribe if you want more. I have been your host, GojiraFerret. Thanks for watching.